I'll see how that goes.
Were you still shouting at me when we started recording, though?
I don't know. Does it actually record when you hit it or when I hit it?
Well, recording had started and you were still shouting at me. Good evening.
Well, Sandi, how are you?
I'm fine. Speaking of seeing, could be rather fractious this evening, or rather, Bill.
Well, I think that I think we're going in at least half of us completely unprepared, but I'm all for it. I like it's like a tightrope.
Well, it's
I like
flying by the
walking.
seat of your pants, isn't it?
It's very American, actually, what we're doing right now, or what I'm doing right now. What
What?
you're doing is very British.
Mama,
Yeah. Okay. Mama.
mama. Immediately, mama. Does
Yeah.
stuff rush in? What rushes in?
Uh. Well. A baby, security. Um. Uh. Vulnerability. I don't know. For me, it's a very sensitive word.
Can you unpack that a little bit, please?
Exposed. I feel like it's funny if you hear that, do you tend to think of it from the mother's side or from the babe's side, if you were going to say that, and you assume that it's two people? I think of it from the person saying it, not the person hearing it.
Yeah, I think I still think of the person saying it. I am the person saying it, mama.
Yeah.
It's a very loaded word, isn't it?
Yeah.
And I'm curious about what it actually means.
To me or in the society?
Well, I mean, mama, mother, right?
Sure.
Mother.
Yeah.
What is a mother?
Life-giving person.
A life-giving person.
Protector. All of these are the ideals, though, right?
And are they the truth?
I think most people would say so, or else I guess we wouldn't be here to some extent.
So is mother responsible for all life?
Well, with all the fathers out there, yeah. But yeah, I guess you're right. Um, who's this artist? I don't know the artist.
Haneem Christian is a kind of poet, visual poet and activist in South Africa. They have just come second place prize in the Taylor Wessing Portrait Prize here in the UK.
Okay. For this image?
With this image, yeah. So there are two images in the show. And this one is the kind of prize-winning photograph. So it's from a series of works that Christian has been making.
Yep.
Kind of inquiring into the notion of, I guess, motherhood, queerness, whether one can choose to name oneself mother, and whether one can, in fact, be a mother without being the mother of the person you choose as your child.
Yeah. Or can one be female without the ability to give birth? All these sorts of questions. It's all very these are all very tricky areas of context we're talking about right now.
They are. I mean, as a photograph, though, and as a representation of mother and daughter, I wonder how we receive that or perceive that. And again, that's then down to the individual triggers in those words, mother and daughter. I think the word daughter is actually almost as triggering as the word mother, actually.
Sure. Yeah. What do you think of this image?
Well, I've shown this to all my classes, And we've talked about the Taylor Wessing Prize, and I've particularly shown them third, second, and first place prize. And a lot of my students have been horrified. Some of them have even
horrified that this was second prize, or horrified that
yes, horrified at the photographs they see and that they perceive as not being proper photographs or good enough photographs, let alone prize-winning.
Well,
receiving photographs.
I think that there is a lot of crap in the things chosen in Taylor Wessing prizes as well. So what do I know?
Was that a little bit of like some kind of bitterness there coming out now, Bill?
No, I just think there's a lot of times I mean, there are images that are chosen for those awards that I'm like, wow, that is a really great image. And then there's other ones, and I look at it and I go, what? I wouldn't even use that as like, that wouldn't even make it past like a single star in my rating system. So, you know, it's all comes down to, you know, who's judging and what they're judging and why they're judging that way. And it's all politics. And
well, I love the color of this image.
Oh, interesting.
I think it's beautiful. I think it's pulsing with a subtle color.
It's funny because the color did not hit me until you mentioned it.
It's clever color casting.
Yeah.
Balance. But the title, Mother and Daughter, is the contentious thing.
Sure.
And I do question, and I questioned when I first saw it as an independent viewer, kind of immediately truthfully rushes in, like, how can this be mother and daughter? Now, then I stay with it a while and I keep myself in check and I look at my prejudice and my privilege. And I think, well, yes, mother and daughter. There are many people we encounter in our lives who might fulfill a role that isn't the typical in that role. And sure. I don't see why mother should be any different. Although there will be some people, of course, who feel extraordinarily precious about mother, that only very particular people can be called mother. And isn't that ironic? Because so many of the world's population are, in fact, mothers. Yet it does sometimes seem as if it kind of like is an exclusive club.
And so many who are or call themselves mothers are not particularly great versions of that word. So, you know.
Well, I'd like to go.
I guess the problem is that, you know, you easily get into a situation where, okay, well, yes, of course it's an exclusive club. Because if it wasn't, then the word wouldn't mean anything. You know what I mean? If anybody can be any word, then those words no longer really have any use in language, you know?
But is what we think of as mother true to the form of mother, or is it kind of like a cultural perception of mother, mama?
Well,
I feel is mama universal, and is it timeless?
I think that it's, yeah. I mean, in the sense that, you know, there is sexual reproduction. Yeah, I mean, if you asked a biologist, they would have answers to whether or not something's a mother. You know what I mean? If you want to talk culturally, that's a whole different stew. You know what I'm saying? Like those are not necessarily, those are a Venn diagram that probably used to overlap more than they do now.
Explain that.
Well, I mean, I think that there are, you know, what we used to in society discuss as gender used to mean the same thing as sex. Not the act, but, you know, the description. And those two things have separated a little bit, you know, in the way that we talk about them, but mostly because the idea of gender has shifted over time. And so, you know, you get into these, I guess, meta questions of I don't like the word roles because it's a weak word. Status, that's wrong. There's like a word that I can't quite put my foot on. I think the problem is that our language doesn't adequately encompass a lot of these ideas. like we're trying to use old language to describe new concepts, and we fail, or we feel like we're you end up offending any number of people by just trying to describe something. And the language will come around. It's the same thing with all of my friends who are pronounced differently and this kind of stuff, where it's like, well, language will eventually suss out and shake out, and we'll figure out a way to deal with this. And I think that to some extent, images like this or work like this, it's more about the commentary than the art in a lot of ways,
I mean, the judges, when they kind of give their blurb about why they've selected an image, praise this image for the beautiful sense of trust that seemed to be present between Cheshire Vineyard and Autumn May. That's the trans feminine artists. They're artists, these people. Yeah. That Christian had captured, and they had obviously built up a rapport over perhaps a year, a couple of years, maybe longer, and then sat for this particular portrait. The trust. I also think interesting thing, I think, in context of mother, because I think there is an element of trust belonging to the word mother. In mother we trust. I mean, the judge's commentary was more about the sense that these people are in some way perhaps marginalized, and that to bear oneself in this way, so openly, candidly, and beautifully, takes a great deal of bravery, perhaps, for certain groups.
Yeah.
But there's also a sense that to declare oneself mother, or indeed daughter, without coming from the kind of biological start point of that descriptor, then there's something about that that requires trust as well. In that, can you imagine somebody who's not your biological mother, in your case, declaring themselves your mother? And how insensitive.
No, because I think the word mother is defined by relationship. It's not defined by a singular person.
Not defined by a singular person. So is mother a collective?
No, I just mean that, like, somebody doesn't decide that they are your mother, except for, choosing to have you as a biological child, I guess, is when to decide that. But, like, I don't think you can decide right now that you are my mother. I could decide that you are. If you say you want to be my mother and I say, yes, I want you to be my mother, then maybe you're my mother. But you don't get to choose that unilaterally. It's about the interaction between you and I, not about any one of us wants, to a large extent. I always feel like there's also by the way, this sun is about to hit me in a very strong way. There's an illusion. Are you going to
burst into flames, Bill?
There's an illusion in a way in photography, and I, have some experience in this, where we as a viewer assume that a fraction of a second is reality. It could be that there's 100 other pictures of the two of them, and in none of them they connect with the camera the way they do in this one. And, it was just the right 125th of a second or whatever it is that they had this look on their face. And the judges read into it and say, oh, this trust the two of them have between each other, when it may or may not actually be true. But there's photography puts a good face on itself,
So the photograph creates the legacy rather than the
people assume photographs are true, when the reality is that generally, on average, I think they're not, but it's that illusion that we love, and paintings, hell, even more so in a lot of ways, right? Because who knows if this situation ever existed, I'm sure you had moments like this. Do you identify with that?
I do.
Yeah.
But I find it curious that I should somehow be different or separate to those people who are not, for example, mothers, in that they have not given birth to someone.
Should there be no, it's not a, you have an experience they don't have. What's wrong with saying that you have a different, you've had this experience that somebody else hasn't had? You know, somebody who's never been on a roller coaster, or somebody who's never had an orgasm, or somebody who's never whatever, you do know something on the other side of that line that you didn't know before. You are different. You are separate. And that's okay. You know, it's interesting that we're so scared of making distinctions in today's world.
But it's not a fear of distinction because I am worried it shows me in a bad way or reveals me as being a dullard or any of the usual things that one might be concerned about in distinction. Funnily enough, this is more about looking at myself, questioning myself, and asking, am I so very different now because of being a mother?
Do you think you're not? And do you think, whatever the answer is, do you think that on average would be true of other women who have had children?
Well, then that's the real question, isn't it? Is, do I believe myself to innately understand all other mothers?
No, of course not.
No.
But
I wonder,
you might have a better idea than I do about it.
Okay, what qualifies me? Simply that, I've pushed a baby out my vagina.
Okay, true. I've never been to war. I trust a guy who's been on the front lines for an hour more than I trust myself about knowing what war is like. That guy might say, I know nothing compared to these people who have been here for 6 years. And of course, that may be true, but I guess that you know more than me. And maybe they don't. Maybe I have learned everything I could possibly learn about war, and that guy who was there for an hour didn't know anything.
So does this mean that experience is always going to trump other kinds of information?
Not always, but at the same time, I don't think that experience is without value. And I think that there's a lot of times sort of like this postmodern analysis of human experience, which sort of degrades experience. It's sort of, it's funny because it's a little bit of a almost like weirdly, oh, well, I'm not going to trust that immunologist because, who knows what they say about COVID. They don't know anything more than me. And it's like, well, yeah, they do, because they've been studying it for 40 freaking years. It's okay that they know more than you do.
No. But even if we stick to the kind of analogy you're making, is motherhood a study?
Yeah, to some extent, isn't it?
Oh, I don't know. I've often questioned this. Virtually anyone who's biologically capable could just have a baby.
Of course.
Right? There is no qualification in that.
No, of course not. But they're going to have the same, weird oxytocin rush and the same possible postpartum depressions and the same, frustrations of waking up in the middle of the night to feed a baby that's crying. Like, all of those are shared experience. That is, if you look up mother in the dictionary, those are the kinds of things that are going to define what mother means. Otherwise, the word mother doesn't mean anything. Might as well be, have some slumpum. And it's like, okay, well, what does that mean? Well, that means people who feel like this. Well, what does this mean? Well, I'm not going to define that because defining that excludes people who want to be part of that. Well, that doesn't mean anything then. And we haven't gotten anywhere. And I understand that I have a very, I don't know, Victorian view on like use of language and ideas. I don't know. I think I can look at this painting, for example. This is from 1895, around when Grover Cleveland won his second presidency, or ran for president a third time. I have lied in bed. I'm not a father biologically, but I have laid in bed next to a young baby like this while they were sleeping and stared at them with maybe not the same love that this woman is, assuming that's her child, is lying in bed with that child, feels for that kid, but with a whole lot of love to protect the kid, because that's just instinctual, right? So I can identify with this despite never having been a parent. And I'm sure there's a lot of people who are men who have gotten women pregnant in bed next to something that is their thing and don't give a crap about the kid. Of course, that's true. I don't know. It's a really, it's a very difficult. I think sometimes we overthink things,
Sometimes. What are you talking about?
Well, I think the irony of it, though, is that, a lot of people would say mom or mother or mama, as you put it. And you could say that is about as fundamental a concept as one could possibly bring up.
Of course. And this is in part why I picked this. Even just in an art context, this is like the repeat motif of entire Western canon of painting. Right?
Sure.
It's mother,
yep.
Right?
Yep.
Notions that are rooted in our kind of Christian wisdom come from a relationship between a mother and God, or her child, or the Son of God, or there's so many kind of things that are embedded and enmeshed in our kind of structure, our social structure, our awareness, our perception is totally kind of overwhelmed. We're saturated by notions of mother handed down through all these centuries of kind of like an indoctrination of social construct, or all these the images, symbol, the motif of mother. And then we are actually, so many of us mothers, and some of us identify or not with those notions that are brought to us. Some of us might worry that we don't align perhaps with the wider notion that we perceive to be. And
that's of societal roles in general, but yeah.
Well, yes. But I look at this painting and you say, oh, do you not, you must identify with this. Of course I do. But so do you, as you've just revealed.
Sure. Yeah.
So I'm wondering, mother, what does it mean? Who is mother? Who is mama? Is mother always she? And again, whatever that means.
Sure. Well, that goes back to, me asking you when you describe something as feminine. It's like, well, what does that even mean? I like rom-coms, sappy music. My wife watches zombie movies for fun. If you listed all the things both my wife and I are into, she's very much a woman, but I would probably be on the more female side of things than she is when it comes to like our I don't know, like our traits.
What are you actually saying?
No, I'm just saying that like it is interesting, like the things that you denote as, say, being male in America. It's just like I don't fulfill most of those things.
Is mother just a stereotype now?
Yes.
What is the stereotype of mother?
Well, it's not a stereotype. It's a platonic ideal. It's a goal. There were all these cases recently in America. I don't know if they made it over there. You brought up that crazy, the what were they, the bog killers? What was the woman's, what were they called?
Myra Hindley, when we looked at Marcus Harvey and the Moors murder.
Moors. Over here in the past few years, women who fake pregnancies and then abduct a woman who is pregnant and kill the woman and take the baby, like these kinds of like crazy psychosis kind of things, they happen. Like a woman was just, sentenced for this kind of crime. And you think somewhere deep in this woman's mind, she desperately wanted to be a mother, whatever that means. And for whatever reason, couldn't herself, but was so drawn to that ideal that she was willing to commit murder to satisfy it. So where does motherhood fit into that? You know what I mean? Like it can get weird at the fringes, I guess is what I'm saying, Well,
I mean, motherhood is kind of weird. And actually, just to share something of this. I mean, this painting to me, Sorolla, by the way, for those people who don't know Sorolla, very well-known Spanish painter, spawned many, if not kind of copycats, but Sorollists who were interested in nuances of light and color. This was seen as a kind of maverick painting. It's not the same, of course, as Whistler's Mother, although I would just like to draw a comparison for a moment because of the use of the expanse of white in the same way that Whistler used expanses of black and grey, which at this time, similar time frame, was very unusual.
Yeah.
And if we look at the rest of Sorolla's kind of archive, we see somebody who was using colour in a way that was vivid. Yet what I find so beautiful is that white here is vivid. And
there's color in the white.
It's so nuanced, isn't it?
Well, it's funny because very much in the same school as the Sargent feel that I really like, which is, massive amounts of detail and faces and everything else is just, but it works, They
were friends. They knew, right?
Yeah. Which you can totally tell. Yeah.
I mean, this is Clotilda, his wife, and Elena, the youngest daughter, born in 1895.
Do you think if you didn't know that, you would think that she was related to the painter, that he was painting something personal?
Yes, I think there is such a sense of intimacy in this, although I'm also aware that, I mean, to me, there's a presence of death in this painting that is really quite striking. This to me is a painting of life and death. It's very strong.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sure Sorolla, Clotilda was his muse, and actually Elena, the child, he painted well into her kind of young adulthood, painted them all the time. But in this, I think we see a different quality to these characters. They are just heads floating in this sea of white. Their pallor, the baby is obviously rosy, vital. The mother is so pale. And it's very triggering, I mean, my entire postnatal period was blighted with the most crippling postnatal anxiety and depression. And the way that manifested in my case was that I became obsessed with my own health, and I suffered from a kind of chronic somatization disorder where I thought I was dying all the time. So I wasn't concerned about my child. They were fine. They were robust and healthy as far as I could tell. But it was the overwhelming responsibility of motherhood. I think it must have triggered something in combination with all those hormones that made me panic that I would leave this vulnerable creature, as robust as she was. And I became overwhelmed by it. And this painting speaks to me of that. Now, in one way, I am actually defining myself as part of that exclusive club of people only who have gone through the physical process of birth that results in a postnatal period of depression or anxiety or some other kind of psychosis. But I'm very aware also that there's a universal nature to mother and motherhood and what mama means. Because aren't we all children? Don't we all come from a mother, even if that mother is absent? All these things kind of collide a little bit in my mind. And sometimes I find it almost irritating that art has dealt with motherhood in a way that kind of perhaps simplifies motherhood.
You mean they make it simpler to digest, or that they oversimplify it?
Well, I mean, of course, now lots of examples come to mind where there is a complexity in the relationships a mother might have. But, you know, mother is a many faceted thing. Mother is not just about the relationship between a woman and a child. Mother is about basically everything of life, and to everything of death, funnily enough. I was listening to somebody talk yesterday about this, that in the early days of having a child, there is such a palpable feeling of being so kind of proximal, so close to death. Because
you're worn out from having given birth.
No, it's that the infant is so utterly vulnerable.
Oh, that part, yeah.
But you can almost like watch it. You can see it. You can feel it. You can breathe it. This proximity to death.
Yeah. I mean, and they lose weight for the first few days, and you know, all that kind of stuff too.
Now, there are many mothers who blithely go through this, but there are also many mothers, not just mothers, families, connected people that go through this. It's kind of a profound transformation of awareness.
Yeah, a friend of ours gave birth 2 days ago, and you know, the pictures seem very beautiful. They seem very happy, and it's like, I have no idea what she's really feeling, you know. Well, Andy Warhol and his mom, that's a whole other bag of chips.
Well, they were very close, weren't they?
That's an understatement.
The thing that I find difficult mostly is that after all that closeness, whatever that means, that in the last year of her life, he put her in a home after she'd lived with him for forever, pretty much. And he didn't go and see her. He refused to see her.
My grandmother, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I've always found that so bothersome, that here was this woman, his mother, and when she became incapacitated in a way that meant she couldn't stay with him, he put her in a home. Yeah. And he wouldn't see her. And she pleaded with him and he wouldn't go.
That's different. Yeah.
And then when she died, he didn't go to the funeral. He paid for the funeral, but he just couldn't go to the funeral. And then a little bit later, there's some evidence in some of his diaries that show a kind of, not a remorse, but a kind of like a quiz with himself, quizzically, or rather questioning, should he have gone? And had he done something wrong?
By not going? Yes, he did. But I don't think Andy Warhol can generally be held up as like, you know, a good role model from a personal point of view.
It's not that. It's just all these relationships that we have in our lives.
Sure.
I wonder if that for the majority, not for everyone, but for the majority, if the relationship we have with our mother is the most fundamental of our life.
Well, I think that that's true of most people. Yeah.
True
and I think,
people. But
yeah,
does that mean that we have almost like a universal experience, and our universal experience is of mother?
yes, because everyone has one.
Right. In which case, do we totally and completely understand mother, mama,
No.
even if we ourselves are not one?
Well, you know, the interpretations of what mother means are as varied as the people who experience that. What was going on in Andy Warhol's head? I don't know. Maybe he didn't want to see his mother like that because he wanted to remember her as she was when he was younger and serving him Campbell's soup. Maybe she, you know, maybe he was just a selfish bastard who didn't want to deal with the pain of seeing his mother deteriorate. You know, we don't know, right? We have no idea. But I mean, the you know, the opposite could be true. You know, of I mean, some other person in the same situation could have done exactly the opposite, probably would have. It's you know, it's like they say in all these ads on all the podcasts I listen to, do all these ads for BetterHelp and all these different therapy, online therapy sessions. They always say, you know, there's no owner's manual to you. You know, we're all born and no one tells us how to live. And I think that that's true. I think that of course there is some level of universality in the idea of mama, but what we do with that, how we react to that, how we perpetuate that onward is all up to us, for better or for worse.
Very interesting, Bill.
Yeah, not bad.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sandi.